We're going to touch on some things tonight, especially for the believers. And when I say believers, let me clarify.
All religions have been usurped and taken over. All religions, all organized religions. It's not about religiosity, nor is it about the disciplines of disciples other than that which comes from the brother that many will discover is true and living. And let me make that clear. I do not affiliate myself with any man-made religion or belief system. However, I do realize that all of them, all good lies, have been hidden and wrapped in truth. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get you. All good lies are wrapped in the truth. That's how it's able to speak to the youth. And the youth can feel it. So this is more for the youth, for the young believers. For those who realize that there's something missing from the so-called church today. And that's what I represent, the way. There is a way. So now we're going to talk about reptilians and vampires. Yep, that's right. How can you believe in Genesis if you call yourself a believer and not understand the true identity of the deceiver? The true identity of the deceiver is that of a serpentine or reptilian being. And nowadays we're able to see this being in new and heightened and enhanced ways by way of HD TV. The very same thing that you saw Roddy Piper look through his looks and be able to see. Now you and I can see, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. So don't let yourself be wrapped in fear. It's not really that queer. But I'm going to make it very clear. And Detroit is in the house without a doubt. So check it out. A big shout out to Blak Man who helped inspire this video. But a lot of times what we'll find is some of us are saying the same things using different terminology. And that's okay. But that's a part of the New World Order chess game psychology. Tricknology. Don't trust religion or science. Some people have made science their religion, where if you find it in a box of books, you believe it's the proof of truth. But if you really believe in a box of books, you'll be dumber than a box of rocks. Believe it. So now, if you're ready to receive it, we're going to break down a couple of things. First of all, for those of us who know that the Bible shouldn't be thrown all the way out, don't throw out the baby Jesus with the bath water, as they say. When you look in the book of Genesis, you find a tale, literally a tale, of a serpent speaking to a woman. First of all, we have to understand that all good lies, meaning all lies that have withstood the test of time, must be wrapped in some degree of truth. So where is the degree of truth? Some of us in the truther movement or in the consciousness movement are able to see the lie, but we miss out on the truth. And Pastor Porkchop and the rest of them are used to help push us totally away from any concept that religion has hijacked. That's right. Religion has hijacked a lot of concepts from what is the truth. So has science. Science has hijacked a lot of concepts from what is the truth. And what is the truth? That the black and white chessboard game that you see the Illuminati give a lot of fame to, that you see in the Masonic lodges as their floors, has to do with mine and yours. And that's the black and white of race, or so-called race. There's one race, the human race. And that's also with religion and science. Each one being used as a pawn, one against the other. The same way men and women, old and the youth, are used against one another. The East and the West are used against one another. All in the same manner. So we must be cautious not to allow ourselves to fall into that particular trick bag. So let's look at reptilians and vampires with an open mind. Because again, we're talking about a Hollywood lie that's used to keep the believers and non-believers blind. Another chessboard dynamic. each one representing a different side of the board, believers and non-believers. So now, reptilians and vampires. In the book of Genesis, you find the word serpent used time and time again. And people will acquaint this serpent with the devil, quote unquote. However, in reality, the word that's used as serpent is not the exact same word that's used for snake throughout the scripture, where you find tales that involve snakes. So what's the difference? The word for serpent is nakash, and nakash literally means the whisperer. So this is something that spoke, and it ain't no joke. And even if you remember the old program Land of the Lost, there was the Sleazaks that lived alongside human beings. And if you also can remember and go back that far, dating myself here, you will recall that the Sleazaks were themselves entranced. They had a hive mind, but their goal was to enslave humans as a whole. The same thing you find in the movie V. So now again, this is nothing but an analogy. This is a way for Hollywood to disguise the concept of demonology or demons wrapped in a vampire or a serpentine disguise. Both analogies for the same thing. So let's look at it. This is something I learned while studying new+world. Dr. York broke this down originally, so he gets credit for that. However, the plot was discovered early on that Dr. York, the doc, was a part of this same agenda. In reality, to send black folks to the mothership, like the cover of the Motor Booty Affair, entranced and given over to the reptilians, philosophically, spiritually, and physically given over to the reptilians, because there is a reptilian and serpentine agenda. Now let's prove it. Let's show and prove, not show and tell. First of all, when you're talking about the Dracos, that is supposedly the constellation that the New Age believers, those who believe in the concept of New Age and Aquarian Age philosophies, will say that's the constellation that the reptilians come from, the Dracos constellation. Well, if you look at the root of the word Dracos, you find Drac or Drac, the same word that you find as the root in the word for Dracula. Now, many are familiar with Bram Stoker's Dracula, and also with Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler, whom George Bush and his family have been related to. Even Fox News admitted to that. And then if you look, the C is nothing but a false letter, because C always represents S or K. In the word Dracula, it represents K. And G, K, and Q are all related letters. Look at the different ways that they spell Gaddafi's name. All with each one of those letters, you'll find news stories spelling his name with each one of those letters. So if you look at the C and you add the little appendage to the C here, you create a G, because G can imitate a K and give you that same sound. So Dracula and Dragon also have the same root that you find in Dracos. Now, there's a relationship between the three words. That's why they look the same. Okay, whenever you see so many symbols stacked together with a similar sound, you better believe they have a similar background. So Dracos is supposed to be the constellation where reptilians come from. Dracula is supposed to be a night being that feeds off of blood. And dragons, well, we know that the dragon is symbolic also with the serpent, because serpent does not mean snake, but some sort of reptilian type of being that spoke, that walked and talked. Because in the tale of Genesis, you will find that the punishment for the snake, or excuse me, for the serpent, was that he would be dismembered and no longer able to walk as he once did, but would forever crawl on his belly. So this is symbolic of the fact that we're talking about a being that once walked and talked. And it talked to Eve, and Eve didn't trip out when a snake started talking to her. If you believe that that's a snake. The only reason you would believe it's a snake is because during the Renaissance, or New Birth period, in Detroit is the Renaissance city. During the New Birth period, artists and sculptors were given the charge by the New World Order at the time, the elite at that time, the Illuminati in charge, to create new depictions that would give your mind new stereotypes or new identities for old concepts. Prior to that time, people were very aware that the book wasn't talking about a snake. But from that period of time afterward, people began to relate the serpent to a snake, and this was a form of tricknology. So now you find throughout history and antiquity the relationship between snakes and wisdom, when in reality it should be serpents and wisdom. Even the Messiah said, "Be wise as serpents and gentle as doves." Some of us are wise as doves and gentle as serpents. Okay, let's get it right. So when you look at Bram Stoker's depiction of the Dracula, it's different than the one you find today for Twilight or Twin Light, because twi is the root for twin. Check it out once again. Twilight or Twin Light. Why? Because there's a duality thing whenever you're talking about vampires. Remember, a regular human in the movies is depicted as turning into a vampire. So that's two identities. The duality thing is huge in mind control. And mind control is a huge part of possession. And at the end of the day, we're talking about possession. We're not talking so much about the scientific concepts or the science fiction concepts of people being taken over by beings from outer space. That's something that Hollywood has also programmed into our minds in order to get us away from any concept that religion has hijacked. Again, there are concepts that religion holds today that are parts of the truth. So if you throw aside all religion, you will throw aside portions of the truth. And if you trade religion or your religious pawn for your science pawn, you are yourself trapped in the chess game on some level. Because all of religion is no truer than all of science. Some people make science their religion. The intellect, as we're told in Erykah Badu's song On and On, most intellects do not believe in God, but they fear us just the same. The intellect is coerced, bamboozled, led astray into making science his religion. Yeshua, or the man that they call Jesus, the entity that was indeed the true and living in flesh, incarnate, made it very clear that he was affiliated with neither. So I suggest that you do the same thing. Remove yourself from both religion and science, but don't throw aside all of the concepts of either. Is that possible? Yes, it is. We can do this. So let's consider some things. Now, to make a pit vicious, we're told, give them blood. Flesh makes you more aggressive and less potent and fertile. It took for me to watch a documentary all about vegetarianism. And I went through a stint while I tried to do that. And I even remember Dr. York saying, well, all of you could never be vegetarian because there's something in your blood that makes you desire blood. There's something in you that will make you want flesh at the end of the day. And that, I believe, was part of the reptilian or Illuminati agenda, and something that he was really in reality given to say. Now, again, oftentimes we have the same concepts and different wordings. And the enemy of my enemy is a friend of me. Believe it. So if we're warring on the same enemy, we're not warring with each other. But let me just perhaps offer you another point of view, my brother. Now, in Bram Stoker's version, the vampire looked much different than you find today in Twilight or Twin Light, where they really made them heartthrobs and sex symbols. But in Bram Stoker's Dracula, you find it with wings and beast-like facial features. Reptilian features, to be exact. They just didn't color it white or black. They made sure to color it pale, not green. That was a throw-off. And when you see the Fox reporters doing their thing, shape-shifting, especially that Fox morning show where the reporter hissed, the same show that W. Bush's daughter was on, where she did her thing and showed her transformation because of the new screens that we have and because of the new vibration that's on the earth. We were able to see that, okay? The snake bites its tail. They don't mean, well, there is a way in which the game is played where the devil has to tell on himself. But they don't always mean to do it. But it's part of the evidence and proof that there is something higher than you. There's something higher than you that allows you to be able to see something that's been hidden for thousands of years. And now is the time that is being revealed for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. So now, the fallen ones entered the reptilians. Who are the fallen ones? They're known by many names. Some call them the Anunnaki. Some call them the Neteru from ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. Many different names, but the game's the same. These angelic beings, or beings with no body, that ain't have no body, ain't nobody, they inhabited physical beings with flesh who vibrated in such a way because of their reptilian brain that some of us still retain. They vibrated in such a manner that they were more optimum subjects to be used for possession. And that goes all throughout history. There are particular cultures and civilizations whose practices made them more susceptible to possession. And that's what we're talking about. And again, that's a term that religion has hijacked. And so when people hear that term, some of them are reticent to want to hear the rest of what you have to say because of what Pastor Porkchop and the rest of the Masonic ran ministerial elite have programmed into our minds as a whole. And that is that you can't trust religion, so therefore throw the baby out with the bathwater, throw it all out. But in reality, there is something to be gleaned from the thing that we call religion. The things that the lies were built on were truth. Foundation has to be steady in order for you to build a structure. And that foundation has to be true in order for the lie to stand for any length of time. So the true foundation of what we're seeing when we're talking about reptilian beings is indeed the serpentine beings, or the serpent beings. The same being that's represented by the tail of Adam and Eve, or the tail in the garden. Literally a tail in the garden. These beings have been seen by different folks. I know some folks that have seen them. Ironically, on my born day, the 16th of May, I was speaking with a friend of mine, and he related a story to me I had never heard him tell. And he told me about a mushroom trip that a friend of his had had, and how during that mushroom trip they saw reptilians, and the reptilians were aware of them, and they wanted to try to rape this individual. Well, ironically, also when I was working for the Department of Commerce, doing the census thing, trying to get me a gig by any means possible, and feeling very guilty about allowing myself to be used to count my people, especially because I was delegated and relegated to the urban community because of my nature. That's where they sent me. But there was a sister who was a Native American, and we happened to do a job at a school, the most elite school in Detroit, and we both was there. We signed up to do it, and we ended up sitting together, and we was rapping back and forth about different things, higher knowledge. And I wrote on a piece of paper, salvia, S-A-L-V-I-A, and I slid it over to her, and I said, "You ever heard of this?" Now, I did that because I had an experience with salvia. Some things you can learn from books, and some things you have to have an experience. Now, I don't recommend that anyone take any form of pharmacon, but at this time, I was adventurous, and in search of knowledge, and I would try to find it any way that I could outside of cocaine, crack, LSD, anything wild like that. If I thought it was from the earth, like some of us believe everything from the earth is all good, so we'll worship the earth. Worship by any other name is still the same. You shouldn't worship anything that can be destroyed. But because I thought it was from the earth, I thought it was all good. So I had a salvia trip, and I wanted to talk with this Native American sister who was obviously conscious about this trip. So I slid the paper over to her. She said, yeah. She said, yeah, me and my friends, we used to, she was a little Eurified. But she said, yeah, me and my friends, we used to take it and drink wine. But that was before I realized how serious it was. I said, really? She said, yeah, a friend of mine, she was really going through a lot of things. And she took some, and she ended up somewhere where she saw reptilians in the room. And they saw her, and they turned on her and tried to rape her. Now, this is two different people with the same story. Unrelated, never talked to each other. What a coincidence, or coincidence, more like it. So there are people who have seen these beings. Not to mention those of us who are able to see them live on TV delivering the news. Much like Roddy Piper could look through his They Live Lokes and see the world around him was not as he thought it was, A, but B, that some of the people that he thought was humans weren't totally that. So it's more comfortable for those of us who have thrown aside all things that religion has hijacked in lieu of taking the truth from those things and keeping that. It's more comfortable to say, well, it's some beings from outer space that's doing this. It's extra dimensional beings. Extra demon Zion beings. That's what dimension means. Demon Zion. Do we need to write that down maybe? Let's look at it. Let's look at the word. And yes, they hide things in the words that they use. So sometimes when you break a word down, you'll be less confused. Dimension isn't spelled exactly like it sounds. Now is it? It's nothing but a play off of demon Zion. And Zion is supposed to be a holy place, right? Look at the Z, nothing but a backward S. Look at the switch up between the vowels and the word demon. It's the same word, just as daemon is the original word for demon. Watch what you call your children. So these beings do come from another place, but it's an unholy place and not out of space. That's the job of science fiction in Hollywood. Hollywood's job is not to tell us the truth. Hollywood's job is to take the truth and turn it into some metaphor or analogy. You find this time and time again. Robots and zombies symbolize us. Yes, there's the transhuman agenda, the agenda to make robots and cyborgs replace us, and also to make us replace certain body parts and eventually our minds with a robotic mind. However, this is achieved more through mind control programming than it will ever be achieved by people getting Terminator parts or new right arms like Luke Skywalker. By way of programming, mind control programming, the same way you program a computer. Many of us are in a routine and we've been effectively programmed and turned to robots because of it. And then others of us have been poisoned by the chemicals that we use, drugs of different kind, pharmacon and pharmakia, and that turns us into zombies, whether it's alcohol, making you black out, making you forget what you've done. I wasn't myself last night. This is what the zombie thing is really about. And yes, they do have things such as the Scooby snacks and the bath salts to actually physically make these analogies reality. Believe it. Just like there will be robot people. Believe it. And just like right now, if you got 5 racks, you can buy you a sex bot, fully equipped. Whatever size and style of female you like, they'll give her the bust size you like. They'll make her the color you like. And they'll even program her with facial recognition software where the eyes are able to see whether your face is smiling or frowning. And there are programmed responses that will be given to you automatically based on the shape of the expression on your face. Believe it. It already exists. Do yourself a favor and look up androids or modern day cyborgs on YouTube. And they'll show you them in action. They have like you have the Comic-Con conference. They have conferences where people that build the best robots and cyborgs show their wares. For who? For the elite first, to have a little fun with. And then for those who got a couple of dollars, so they can run with it. So let's not fall for those things either. These are analogies. Vampires are Hollywood's favorite costume for demons, to remove the religiosity from the concept. And there is truth to the fact that demons exist. You will only know if you have some study of demonology and some experience with it. I did not believe that demons existed. We were taught in the Nation of Islam and in the 5% nation, the gods on earth, that demons and spirits and ghosts was all part of the agenda to make you afraid of the unseen. They called it spookism, and they said none of that stuff was real. It took for me to have an experience with an extra dimensional being to ever believe that such a thing could even exist. And I hope for you, and my prayer for you, is that you don't have to have that type of experience to realize the existence of such a thing. That you can see through Hollywood. Hollywood is not so game goofy as to tell you the exact truth. But what they will do is they will hide the truth within their lie. Or even better, they'll stack up their lie on top of a foundational truth. Alright, let's look at some more things. Now, dragon. There are many Asian cultures and Eastern cultures that revere the dragon. Even Krishna is always seen with a snake wrapped around his neck. And the snake has been a symbol for wisdom for thousands of years. You have these snake gods, the Numos of the Dogon tribe. You have, of course, in ancient China and Japan, the dragon kings, or the emperors, who believed in the power of the dragon. You have in the Zulu culture, Zulu nation, the Chetahuri, in which Credo Mutwa gave us some information about and drew them. They looked exactly like Darth Maul, a character from the Star Wars series. And then, of course, you have Quetzalcoatl from the so-called South American myths. And when they call something a myth, and we're talking about religious myths, we're really talking about, again, lies built on top of the foundation of truth. Any practice that tells you that if you conjure up a being, you will be able to excel and go further can be traced back to ancient times when the pharaohs were told that if they allow themselves to practice certain magic and open themselves up, these gods will enter into them and they themselves will become gods. And that's why many pharaohs believed that they were gods. So this did start back with our culture. And when I say our culture, I mean so-called black folks, African Americans, so-called African Americans. Because the black man did his thing all over the planet. So all of us don't even descend from Africa. Have mercy. Nor do we all descend from slavery. Dr. Alex Haley or let me see, Goodbye Uncle Tom, different films like that. These films were used to, and Queen, these films were, and Django, these films are used to program you into believing that that's all you were, was a slave. True indeed. But it's also programmed to point you in the direction of African spiritualism as your original religion. You will find aspects of that always in these movies. And in reality, much of the truth about your religion has been hidden, and only by those who are unable to see beyond a certain veil. It has been hidden in the book that they call the Bible. Now, wait a minute. If there is a creator, an almighty, most high, true and living, supreme being, how do you believe that there is a being wrapped in flesh that's able to take what he said and mix it up? Have mercy. Well, you don't believe there's a supreme being. Just go there. But if you believe there's a supreme being, you must believe that that supreme being meant for you to win in the end. It's a tight fight, but you can win in the end. And so something would be left that could not be tainted. That make the game fair. Otherwise, Lucifer is indeed God, because he would be godlike if he could take everything and twist it around, and nothing would be beyond his range of influence and his scope of influence or touch. But there are things that cannot be corrupted. There are people that can't be corrupted. There are mind states and vibrations that cannot be corrupted. So if I write from out of that mind state of that vibration, if the true and living creator is inspiring what I'm writing or what I'm saying, there's no way that the underling being, the peon in neon, Lucifer himself, would be able to change around anything that was given to me by the almighty most high creator to say. Believe it. That don't make no sense. So the fallen ones entered the reptilians. This is exemplified in a lot of different ways. If you look at the movie Fallen, you see how the spirit jumped around from person to person. The same thing happened then when they were taken from out of one realm, much like General Zod and the villains from the Superman movie were banished to a particular realm, and they were trapped inside of a prison. That prison represents the body. Those spirit beings were trapped. They were sent to be entered into the serpentine race. So this is how the serpentine race can change their face. It is physiologically impossible and beyond science for something's face to change and shift. So for you to believe that science is supreme, or for you to use science as your religion and make everything scientific, then turn around and say people are shape-shifting, that's a form of mental duality. And that's part of mind control. To split your mind into believing two opposing realities at the same time. At the same damn time. Have mercy. Now, in vampire movies, we're told they can transform. They need blood, which is life force to feed upon. And anyone who lets them in can get it. We're told that you can't be attacked by a vampire unless you first allow for it to come in. It has to ask you to come in, and you have to give it the okay. This is nothing but symbolism used in demonology or in spiritism. The use of certain scientific forces or geometric magic to call up spirit beings to come into your body. That's you giving them permission. And this is the exact same thing that you find time and time again, analogy after analogy of vampires that relates directly to this reptilian truth that is the foundation for vampire movies. Let's look at some more. Now, Dracula is called a demon in the old school vampire movies. Interesting. Now, when they say you have to let them in your house, this is also symbolic of the fact that what you're wrapped in, this flesh that I'm in, from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet, is my temple. Not just this part of my body, but the entire thing. It's a temple in which a spirit lives. And it's either going to be one spirit or the other. There's no differentiation. Either your spirit is of the Most High or your spirit is of the Most Low. And you can have the spirit of the Most High and still not believe in Him. I was at that point in place at one time. So that's why I overstand from a 720-degree frame of mind. All praise is due to the Most High for that. For I didn't do it in and of myself and by my own power or my own might or intellect. For I have none, I am nothing and no one except that which the Creator allows me to be. And that is infallible. The part of me that is like the Creator. The part of me that's me makes mistakes. I make them all the time when I allow for myself to be driven and controlled by my own mind. But there is a greater spark of the Creator within all of us that we can tap into from time to time, and it cannot be deceived. The same way its words can't be changed up. So you mean to tell me in ancient times there were nobody, no prophets, no writers, no scribes who had divine minds? If there were writers and scribes that had divine minds, they would have been able to write things that came directly from the divine, and those things would be unable to be changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So you see, there are concepts wrapped in Christianity that are really true. The foundation of Christianity is really about me and you. So let's look at a few more things. Now, of course, there was the movie the miniseries V, which came out when I was in middle school, I believe, at first. And then they redid it a few years back, and ABC TV was who brought it back to you. And ABC is owned by Disney. Disney is all about mind control. The programming on TV and the programming in movies is all about mind control. They mix the lie with the truth, of course. But the job was to make you see something that is a spiritual concept as a science fiction concept. So when it's brought to you from the spiritual side, you will only see it from the science fiction side. That's the job of science fiction. I hate to tell you that. But mysticism is truly what science is based off of. And religion. So both science and religion are tied originally to magic. The same things that today we call science, if you would bring a person back from the 1500s and the 1400s, and they would see us doing certain things, like me talking to this computer and my face on this screen at the same time, they'll run away screaming because they would swear it was a form of magic. So the very same things that today we call science, yesterday we called magic. Who was telling the truth? The people today who are more blind than ever before, their minds more clouded than ever before by ELF towers, by chemtrails dropping barium and aluminum to cloud your mind and your ability to think and reach out to the Most High, supreme being of the universe and his vibrations. Or those who had less confusion around them and who could focus more easily upon things of the divine. Have mercy. So now, Nakash, the Whisperer, consider in the film Enemy Mine, the reptilian, oftentimes, and in vampire movies, you'll find the reptilian will oftentimes have a whispery or raspy voice. This is symbolic of the fact that the elite know the difference between the serpent and the snake, the whisperer and the thing that writhes around on the ground and don't make hardly no sound but a hiss. And yes, the serpentine being has many characteristics that we can relate back to the snake. Well, they're related. Well, so is a cat and a lion. But they're a little different now, aren't they? So now you have the ancient snake gods, and you have the snake as a symbol of wisdom. Why? Again, Yeshua knew about the reptilians when he said, be wise as serpents. Now Crowley, Aleister Crowley, that is, one of the #1 occultists of the 20th century, who basically set up a lot of the foundations for things we say today, like do you only live once, BT Express, do it till you're satisfied, do what you want to do. The Crowleyan mantra of man, do as thou wilt. Aleister Crowley is responsible for that. He's responsible for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club's Band, which was one of the Beatles' most famous albums, where Aleister Crowley's picture can be found among the luminaries and famous people that the Beatles chose to be on the front of their album, or so maybe they chose, maybe MI6 really chose them. And also the inspiration behind Michael Jackson's band leader uniform. That was a nod to Aleister Crowley as their god, a.k.a. Sgt. Pepper, or Sergeant Black, talking about the darkness. Now this was a disguise. Again, the Illuminati do their thing in the dark. They try to remain hidden by way of different clever little disguises and analogies and metaphors. So we have to be able to look beyond the doors of these metaphors and see the foundation that they were built on, going all the way back true to some of the ancient religions, Kemet, Timbuktu, too. But they were deceived. You see, after the fallen angel beings came down, or the so-called angelic beings, came from the land of the lost, or the land of nobody. After they came down and found them bodies to chill in, then the next thing was they used these bodies to oppose man physically. How? To eat man, to drink of his blood, to be offered sacrifices by men themselves who wanted a part of this power that they saw these demons exhibit, these reptilian demons. Some of the ancient depictions of the adversary is as a reptile being. Even in the original Rosemary's Baby, which I defy you to find a copy of with ease. I know my main man, Milwaukee Pudge, as soon as I put him up on it, he found it, he realized the truth, and he didn't budge. He saw right and exact actual fact, what I'm telling you right now, that you will see if you can look back and find you a copy of Rosemary's Baby. Baby, believe it. Rosemary's Baby had reptilian features. Also, as a matter of fact, they took out one of the clips that showed the eyes of the baby having slits. When Rosemary's being raped in the ceremony that they actually did on Mia Farrow, because again, within movies, we're not just watching people act out things that are untrue. We're watching them act out and perform ceremonies and rituals too, live on camera. And then they show it to me and you, and we become a part of watching the ritual. And we begin to internalize some of the same spirit beings that they themselves conjured up during the ritual that they caught on camera and called it a movie. But Rosemary was being raped by, and I've heard some say that it was Anton LaVey who played the devil in that scene. You know, do your research on that. But that's neither here nor there. That particular depiction of the devil had scaly skin. Okay, now Aleister Crowley said when he conjured, when he went to Egypt and did a working, he conjured up Heru, who some call Horus from the Greek era, and who Kanye rocks around his neck, the hawk-headed god, and the hawk is a bird of prey. You have to pray away the bird of prey, a predator, and the predator is also symbolic of these demons. But Aleister Crowley said that this being that he saw, that many of you have been fooled into believing was a gray, because that's the way that it manifested itself to him as a throw-off to us. Or that's the way that he drew it, being unable to show a true depiction of it. Because we also find in some of the ancient myths that the reptilians would not allow for the artists and the sculptors to draw them looking like they actually looked. The Dogon culture had spoke of that, although you can find some Dogon artifacts and sculptures that show alligator-headed men approaching women who are laying back in prone position with their breasts in cone shape, which is representing fertility or sex act. And this is the original root or the foundation for sex magic. Even our good brother Bobby Hemmett, whom I pray recovers in more ways than one, even our brother Bobby Hemmett tells you how if you do these certain African ceremonies and certain things that's supposed to be quote-unquote ours, if you do these things, then you will be able to perform sex better, and you will have the incarnate powers of these spirit beings or our quote-unquote gods. It's the same lie and the same deception that took the pharaohs down through there. And it's proof on most pharaonic headdresses and also on the walls of the Temple of Hathor. You can see proof and evidence of this serpentine or serpent being influence on Egyptian or ancient Cometian culture. On the pharaoh's headdress is the uraeus, usually right here, over the part of the body that those who believe in chakras will call the third eye. And again, no concept, no good lie can stand the test of time without being built on a foundational truth. And the foundational truth is, just like any temple has different levels, the basement, the main floor, the attic, so does the body. The body does indeed have different levels, and you know that because at the top of the body, the Most High in his grand supreme artistry and wisdom decided to put the brain at the top of the body, because everything starts with the mind. As a man thinketh, so shall he be. My old dude used to say, mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. Everything starts with your thought. As a man thinketh, so shall he be. So it is indeed true that there is significance as to why the pharaohs put the uraeus here on their headdress, as opposed to on the back or on the side or on the chest or on the feet. That was symbolic of what was controlling and ruling their mind. And it was our culture, the ancient kings of old, that began the first royalty that enslaved the subjects. So don't be so quick to say, oh, we were all kings and queens. How can everybody be kings and queens? Ain't no subjects. So who was the subjects that the kings and queens was ruling over? This is where you get the real concept of Ibri, which again was hijacked by the Zionists and the Jesuit agenda to take certain concepts that were true and to wrap them up in the lie of religion, to religion or to religion yourself, to give yourself a legion again, or some will say to tie back, to tie you back, like the police would tie your arms back. So Crowley said that I was, not I am, but I was the name of this being that he conjured when he called himself conjuring up Heru. This being that supposedly, to some of you, is supposed to be a gray, which again, these are disguises that these spirit beings are able to morph themselves into. Transformers more than meets the eye for real. And Transformers is another big analogy, again, for this possession, for these fallen angels coming down. Remember, they're from outer space. One of the last Transformer movies was called, what, Revenge or Return of the Fallen? We heavyweight jamming and yes, yes, y'allin'. But I was this being that Crowley called upon while in Egypt. So don't be so quick to run to Egypt because you don't want to have no discipline. You want to do what you want to do. And there's no book, no real prescribed way to follow the Mayat, right? Truth, justice, you do what you want to do. And most of the brothers and sisters that I know that follow that science are very undisciplined, and so are their children. Because they've been taught a way that's not the way. A way that makes you put yourself as a god. The same Aquarian lie that they tell the white brothers and sisters that's into the New Age. Just call it black. I call it the Aquarian Age or New Age lie noir. So I said to him, I am the serpent that giveth man knowledge. Why did he use that terminology? Out of all of the things that this thing could have said to Aleister Crowley. Because Aleister Crowley had himself conjured up and contacted a boss reptilian or boss serpentine being. Even the desire to be royal or to put yourself above others, psychology will tell you, comes from the R-type thinking or the reptilian part of the brain. Yes, there's a part of your brain that psychologists and psychiatrists call the reptilian brain. And reptilian brain thinking is what makes one person want to be competitive over another. It's huge in sports. And I'm going to save a lot of that for the teaching that I'm going to do on sports, probably following this. But I wanted to get a little panel together so that we have a wide range or of point of views concerning sports. And also, whenever you watch sports, they've always got a panel. So when we break sports down, we're going to have a panel too. But I was, because he's not I am, called himself the serpent that giveth man knowledge. And he said that his prophets should drink strong drink and take strong drugs. Why? Because this creates a vibration that the mind at the top of the body sends down to the other floors in the body that allows for yourself to open up doors in the body. And it's through these doors that these beings, these extra dimensional things, can walk. Yes, there are some who have inhabited bodies, but that ain't all of them. There's a lot of old ones waiting to get in here, waiting to get in your temple, waiting to get in my temple. And there are things placed all throughout pop culture and all throughout society that are designed specifically to cause you to tune your mind in like a radio dial to the right frequency. Anger, hate, disbelief, self-deification, and pride. And once you tune yourself to that proper frequency, they can walk right in you. They used to call them walk-ins in Nuwabu. They said they were walk-ins, stand-ins, and sit-ins. Walk-ins can walk in and out. Some people got a sign on their temple say walk-ins welcome, just like the beauty shop. Then you have sit-ins. Sit-ins and stand-ins are for those who have more than oppression or depression. They have full possession. That means that this particular spirit being has this person. And once it has you on that level, then it can cause you, because you are made of molecules that are not touching like it look like they touching. It can cause those molecules to change shape. And it's a spiritual reality more than a scientific one. Science will tell you, and medicine, the medical profession, will tell you that that is impossible. But again, if you try to realize spiritual concepts using intellectual thought, you will be lost in the sauce. Believe it. Frances Cress Welsing has a famous statement that she makes where she says, until you understand white supremacy, everything that you think that you understand will only confuse you. I like to amend that. And I say, until you overstand mind control and demonology, everything else that you think you know will only confuse you. So don't trust religion or science. They're both part of the chess game. Religion and science both are black and white pawns. Just like male, female, young and old. Black and white. If you discard all things that religion has stolen, you'll use scientific terms. And then you'll be trapped in that trick bag. The trick bag of science. Science! Blinded me with science. You'll be blinded with science. Why? Because who approves science? Academia. Who runs academia? Well, academia comes from the universities. Who runs the universities? Fraternities, sororities, and philanthropic groups. Philanthropists. People with old money. How you get old money? You be high society. If you're high society, you belong to one of the secret societies. So if you trust only what the universities say or what you can find in science, you in as big a trick, and you are religiously following that the same way people religiously follow the false religions of this world. Now, there's some discussion about blood type preference by these creatures. Well now, because certain cultures vibrate in more warlike or more covetous or more jealous or angry manners than others, then those cultures are more easily walked in, sat in, and stood in than other cultures. But guess what? Nowadays, because there is a practice in warfare where you aim certain weapons at certain demographics more so than others, and where you design certain weapons specifically for certain ethnic groups, there have been weapons that have been designed to take over particular frames of mind. So you find more effort sometimes in the black community to suppress our ability to think and to grow, to arrest our development. Why is that? Everyone knows it's true. Part of it is to keep the black and white race game going on. That's part of it. But the other part is there is such a thing as dominant and recessive in scientific theory, right? Don't throw all of science away. Throw away the bones and keep the meat. So in scientific theory, you're told that there's dominant and recessive all throughout nature. Well, it's also that in human beings. So the being that has more dominant physicality and mentality, or a form of nature that's much different, would have different weaponry aimed at it. So because the attack is stepped up, I find more brothers and sisters with spiritual issues of oppression, depression, and possession than ever before these days. We're the ones listening to the music by and large and making and creating the music by and large that's used to enslave the masses today. We produce it, we write the songs, we perform them too. Our children are off the hook in the public schools, like all young people, because there is an agenda by another being to take out the human race. That's black, white, Chinese, and other. But yes, they step their game up and they adjust their weaponry for each particular culture, ethnicity, or nationality. And they do this because there's different things that turn us all on. And because of the Caucasians' history in the cave, there was a certain insecurity that was bred. And again, this is all part of the plan of the prince of this world. Even Yeshua the Messiah said that the adversary was the prince of this world, which gives that being, or that king of serpents, certain dominion and power to set up the rules. So the rules were set up where the Caucasian was kept in caves and was given an inferiority complex. We were allowed to build huge monuments to ourselves, drape them in gold, and have a superiority complex. And now the game is switched. Same game, different name. This, what we live in today, is the Babylon of today, and it's run primarily by white people. But that's part of the throw-off. Because of their vibration, they've been used for thousands of years to help to feed their insecurity, give them a false sense of superiority. And now we've all evened out. The black man who once lived in the temples and the pyramids, or who once did his ceremonies in the pyramids and lived in the great civilizations, now are relegated to projects and hoods and ghettos that look like caves. And the caveman, the Caucasoid, he's had his place switched. It's trading places, Eddie Murphy. He had his place switched, and now he has the highfalutin palaces, building great monuments to himself. Both of them put in the trick bag. So now, why are certain entertainers not aging right? Keanu Reeves, Liz Taylor, Pharrell, Susan Lucci, Angela Bassett, who plays a witch in the American Horror Story series, even LL Cool J. Angela Bassett, huh? That's how Stella really got her groove back. Drinking some of that good baby's blood. Have mercy. These folks not aging right. Because one thing that the spirit beings are able to do is to shapeshift you, to preserve the case that they're in, because they overstand certain forbidden magic. Aleister Crowley implored homosexual magic because he knew that the more vile the act, the more you tore the veil of time and space, the dimensional veil that separates where we are now from where the unseen spirits and unclean spirits dwell. And you can let them in by doing certain vile acts, okay, without the need of drawing certain geometrical shapes and using sacred geometry. He wanted to find new and more effective ways to bring the old ones in, quote unquote. And he did. By doing vile things like having sex with children and then upon climax snapping their necks. These things tore the veil of time and space. This shows you that there's some reality to the concept of so-called holy and unholy. Again, these are things that have been stolen. Let's look at the words holy. Let's look at the word holy. Now you have phonetic tricks. Because of the dictionary, which should be called what? The definitionary, right? Because you look it up for definitions. But low key, the first thing you see is the way to pronounce the word. Why do you need to know how to pronounce it? If you didn't know how to pronounce it, you wouldn't be looking it up. Have mercy. But you look at these words. The concept of holy. Phonetically, holy. Let's do it like this. And li in French is the masculine for the. Li and la. So whether it's holy, El-Elo, or Allah, backward, you have the same phonetic spelling. Do you see that meaning? Do you see that? El-Elo. Now some would say this is a reference to a Canaanite god. Well, it may very well be. But you have to show me that beyond academia. Because I don't trust what they have to say. But right there you see that there's some tricks in the mix. El-Elo, or the mighty one, or mighty powers, Elohim. When you turn El-Elo backward, which is where you get Allah, or El-Elah, Allah. When you turn it backwards, you get holy. Have mercy. They playing games with the names of things. So, but there is truth indeed to these concepts, because it's what the elite need in order to bring through these spirit beings, which shoot them up, baby, which shoot them up to the top like the silver shadow. And yes, my private joy, Prince's private joy, wasn't his boy toy. They sing with a certain duality, more than one meaning, such as when Rick James sings about Mary Jane, he's partially talking about marijuana, which is a word in duality. Mary, for the name Mary, female name, and Wana for the name John. Mary and John. Have mercy. And a lot of folks will use their smokes in these ceremonies, whether they're official Illuminati ceremonies or whether they're just ceremonies in the bedroom, that you end up practicing without knowing about it. The spirits will come whether you mean for them to or not if you do the right thing. In this case, the wrong thing. Or if you do the right thing, as in right, as in ritual, R-I-T-E thing. Do the right thing. So they use pornography also, where you'll find reptilians in that genre of Hollywood as well. And yes, Hollywood is behind porn as well. So many stars have made the transfer over the cusp from one side to the other, from porn to Hollywood, or from Hollywood to porn in some cases, back in the day. But you'll find, I saw a YouTube video that showed Cherokee with the vein coming up her head, like you find depicted on Aleister Crowley's Iwas. And you will find this when you do certain things. And yes, there are people with certain blood types and bloodlines that are more susceptible than others. It's one reason why the elite and the royalty keep it in the family. But this also goes back to how demons operate through ancestral possession. Yes, your granddaddy was an alcoholic, your daddy was an alcoholic, you were alcoholic. Psychology says this is the way that it normally goes. Why? Because normally you're going to take medicine, or you're going to go to a 12-step program or some other foolishness, in a 12-step, like 12 steps of the pyramid, or some other foolishness that will keep you from going to any concept that's been buried in the deception of religion, which deliverance is one of those concepts, what they call exorcism. The Catholic Church took a hold of that. They made movies about it, and the Catholic Church is so dirty, like Pastor Porkchop. Anything that comes from Pastor Porkchop, you want to throw it out the window. Or anything that Catholicism says, you want to throw it out the window. What is the foundational truth that that lie was built upon? And don't point me to ancient Egypt. Because again, we have showed and proven that the pharaohs were the first ones who got the Illuminati moving. They were the first rulers of the earth, Psalms 2 and 2. The kings of the earth and the rulers set themselves together to take counsel against the Most High and against his anointed and appointed. Have mercy. So now, because of the new TVs also, we're able to see also. It's part of the snake biting its tail, that famous symbol that some of us have seen before. I'll just draw it for those who are not familiar. But there was a show used to come on around the time of X-Files popularity called Millennium, and it didn't last very long. When programs don't last long, it's not because of ratings. They don't care nothing about ratings. It's because the program was said and done. That was all they had to say about the subject for the time. They gave you the program they wanted you to have, literally, and then they stopped. It's time for a new program. Well, you see the Illuminati symbol of the snake with its tail in its mouth. This is representative of the fact that any good Luciferian worth his weight in gold, alchemy, knows full and well that at the end of the day, the snake that runs things is going to collapse upon himself. This society was built to be destroyed. Build and destroy. Chaos out of order. One of their favorite little Illuminati slogans. Out of chaos will come order. So they're creating a situation right now where we're chaotic. They're feeding us people food, literally. They're grinding up all sorts of ungodly things and putting them in the meat that we eat. To make a pit vicious, you give them blood. Flesh makes you more aggressive and less potent and fertile. We believe that it's a manly thing for you to eat a steak. But do you know that the cholesterol inside of that meat clogs up your arteries, which will restrict blood flow, and it's blood flow to the penis that causes it to get erect? Have mercy. So therefore, things like vegetables and fruit, which do not leave that residue or that clog in the arteries and in the veins, allow for the blood to flow more freely, and therefore give you more bounce to the ounce. Okay? But of course, there's an agenda, a beef lobby, and a fast food agenda, which I also have a video on. So I'm not going to go off into so much of that, but there's a fast food agenda. Very few people go to the fast food restaurant and get salad. And I'm going to tell you something else. I wouldn't get a salad from a fast food restaurant. There's an agenda to poison the human race. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning. To poison us in sex, to poison us in our eating, to poison us in what we call our entertainment, which is to enter. Let's look at that word. We talked a little bit about atonement, which is at one-ment or at one mentality. Let's look at that so we can make a relation right quick. Ment is the root word for mind. Why you say mental having to do with the mind, don't you? Look at the hard sounds. Remember, T is D. Tahuti was originally spelled Jehudi or the Jedi or the Jedi. Take out your vowel, the E. You can switch and put any vowel there. And you see that ment is the word mind. So when you see atonement, it's saying at one ment or at one mentality. At one mentality with the Most High. So when you see entertainment, you have to understand that the word tame is the origin for the word tame. Tame and tame have the same root. So enter a tame mentality. Enter a tame ment or a tame mind, a tame mentality. To tame you, it enslave you. So they try through all of these different ways to destroy the human race. That's black man, white man, Chinese man, and it ain't no joke. So anyone who is out here attempting to try to pit one nationality against another, whether it's through war or race war, is part of this agenda, knowingly or unknowingly. Their reptilian brain is out of control. And that's the goal, to make your reptilian brain out of control. They feed the hood gangster rap, which really boosts up the reptilian mindset. Look back at the G-Funk era, when brothers and sisters was really getting murked when gangster rap first came out. The G-Funk, we're told, stood for gangster. But I maintain, what I've thought now for some time, is that's not the G they meant. Not for gangster. What's up, G? They meant that funk. Because what you find overwhelmingly is brothers and sisters was going nuts with that high-pitched keyboard that was supposed to mock Ohio Player's funky worm that you found in all of the old G-Funk. Which it sounded like snake charming music to me. And even in the funky worm, it was an aspect of snake charming. Was the funky worm really a funky snake? That sound just like snake charming. MC Breed sampled it and used it for Ain't No Future in Your Front. There ain't no future in yours. Now, I also know another sister who had a dream or a vision, and she wasn't conscious, not on this level, and I mean on the level that we're speaking of. But she had a dream and a vision that disturbed her, and she told me about it, where she dreamt that a huge dragon was in her midst and was tempting her to come into its mouth. Have mercy. Think about the popularity of rare or medium rare cooking among the high society types. You and I, we regulos. We like our meat well done. But there are those who like their meat half cooked or even almost uncooked. And they consider that's supposed to be good eating. Even in Rosemary's Baby, there's a key scene where the baby is really growing and affecting her physiology. And she goes to cook a steak. And instead of letting it cook, she just impulsively flips it over a little on one side, flips it over a little on the other side, and she eats it right then and there. And I wondered to myself, now, what did they put in that pan? Because the camera didn't go off of her. You saw her put it in the pan, flip it over one time, cut it up and eat it. Did Mia Farrow really eat that raw flesh? Remember, they cause you to do the things in the script as part of your ritual, just like the putting on of the dress. So let's see, have we gotten to everything on this page? I believe we have. So I hope that by this time you have some idea about the huger part of the agenda that's not often spoken of for population control. Population control is achieved a lot of ways. The fluoride in the water, the chemtrails in the sky. But also, in the TED conference, they showed the desire to use vaccines to kill us off. And they showed this equation showing carbon dioxide, or CO2, which we supposedly the trees give it off, and the oxygen mix and whatnot in the air is oxygen and carbon, which are supposed to be two of the building blocks of life. But what I saw when I saw this equation, which was CO2 PSEC, I saw the word corpses. You say, well, how did you see corpses and it ended in a C? Because a C ain't no C. A C is a K or a S. A C is nothing but half a cipher or half a circle. And that's a Masonic letter. A Masonic letter that was inserted into the alpha beta or the alphabet in order to confuse you and replace S's and K's with another letter so you wouldn't pick up on a relationship between that word and another word. Part of the spell of spelling. So I saw the word corpses. And of course the 2 in the CO2, I thought about, we can do these equations. We don't do it, but the spirit within us cannot be fooled. Matthew 24:24. If it were possible in the last days, there would be those tricks would be so great that if it were possible, it would fool the very elect. So the 2 reminded me of the 2 letters that form the R, which can be used the same way forward and backward. Ra, like Melly Mel and them used to say, or like Rakim would call himself. You turn Ra backward and you have R. It was just 2 letters with a mighty power behind it. But it's all about creating corpses out of all of us, making us zombies, making us robots, and making us vampires. Analogies for being demon possessed at the end of the day. Because whether you believe in them or not, they believe in you. This has been Unplugged, representing Detroit, Michigan. Praise Yah.